Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our 5th Day of Remembrance. This event at OPPD started in 2013. It was really the brainchild of Jackie Jensen, who has worked at OPPD for many years in our Career Connection program with her mentor at that time, John Thurber. And her project was to create a day of remembrance where we could really remember the men and women at OPPD that have given their lives for the service that they provide to our customers here in eastern Nebraska. And so we thank Jackie and John for continuing this and for continuing that focus and for us to really honor our community here at OPPD. And I say that because our core values have been pretty clear at OPPD, and I think even though we've really kind of materialized them over the last couple of years, they really have lived long here at OPPD, where we have had a passion to serve, where we honor our community, and we really care for each other. And this is really fitting for us to have this here at the Omaha Center, because over the last 36, 48 hours, our men and women at OPPD have worked tirelessly through the nights to restore power to the folks in eastern Nebraska, from as far north as Blair to as far south as Rulo, with the winds and the rains and the lightning and the storms that blew through. And so many of them are just getting off of work this morning and that have come in to be part of the Day of Remembrance. So we truly want to thank them for their service that they continually have. And today what we're going to do is really honor the 18 employees' lives that really lived out these core values every day and gave the ultimate sacrifice of their life for these core values. And it's our responsibility to really honor this community of 18 employees and their families for that commitment to service for our customer owners here in eastern Nebraska. And so we'll recognize each one of these employees as we go through the day. And if you do have the opportunity to see our board meetings that are streamed online, we actually recognize each one of these employees over a course of a month. It's really an opportunity for us to reflect on the seriousness of the work that we do, but also the sacrifices that the men and women have made here at OPPD on behalf of our customer owners that sometimes is certainly taken for granted. So today we're going to dedicate this ceremony, the Day of Remembrance, to the 18 employees who in the line of duty unselfishly sacrificed their lives in the service of others. And I'm going to step through each one of these. And we do have some of the family members in the audience, and I'll have that opportunity to introduce them as we go through this Day of Remembrance. Ed Runka. Edward was a lineman and died on April 16, 1946, while working on a 7,600-volt line in Bellevue, Nebraska. He was attempting to fasten his safety belt when he made contact with the line. He was 56 years old, with 26 years at OPPD at the time of his death. He was survived by his mother, 2 brothers, and 5 sisters. Herschel Lunsford. Herschel was also a lineman and died April 17, 1947. He died as a result of an electrocution he sustained while straightening a pole in the 66 kV line near 108th and Blondo in Omaha. Cotton, as he was known, was 40 years old with 19 years at OPPD. According to the May 1947 flash, Cotton's ability and judgment were highly respected by his men, and he held the complete confidence of his supervisors. His foremanship was of the highest character. 17 years earlier, when Cotton had only 2 years with the company, he received a medal for saving the life of a fellow employee who had suffered electric shock. He was survived by his wife, Geraldine, and 2 sons, Gene and Dennis. Arthur Packheiser. Arthur Packheiser died on February 25, 1948, from injuries sustained in a 35-foot fall when his pole that he and his co-worker were on broke off near the base. The co-worker, Bert Christensen, was hospitalized with fractures. They were working in Herman, Nebraska at the time. He was 49 years old at the time of his death. He was survived by his wife Velma, daughters Constance and Laura Jean, and his son Raymond. Wesley Hicks. Wesley was also a lineman and died on July 17, 1950, after making contact with a 13 kV line while working near 65th and Sprague in Omaha, Nebraska. He was 29 years old with 5 years at OPPD at the time of his death. He was survived by his wife Dorothy and a child. Larry McGrew. Larry McGrew was a lineman and died on May 16, 1951 from injuries sustained from a fall while working on a pole near 59th and Military in Omaha, Nebraska. He was 35 years old at the time of his death, and his wife, Marion. Utility work was born in the blood of the McGrews. Larry's father, Scott McGrew, joined OPPD's predecessor, Nebraska Power Company, in 1913 as a lineman's helper. Scott retired from OPPD in 1951 as a district foreman and acting local manager. Scott was civic-minded and served as the mayor of Louisville. Larry's brother, Walter Chris McGrew, also worked 38 years for OPPD from 1951 to 1989. Chris started as a utility man in the rural operations and retired as a field supervisor of transmission and distribution at the Irvington Center. Another brother, John McGrew, worked as a lineman for Nebraska Power Company, the predecessor of OPPD, but sadly in the early 1940s, John also was killed doing line work. We have several members of his family that are here today that I'd like to recognize. His daughter, Bonnie McGrew Dobbs, is here. Bonnie's husband, Dan Dobbs, is here. We have a great-grandson, Tony Dobbs, that is here, and Tony's wife, Tommy, is with him today. We have Sandy Doty, who is a niece of Larry, and by the way, Sandy's father also worked, Paul Doty also worked for OPPD for many years as well. And Scott McGrew is also a nephew that is with us in the audience today. So we thank you for being here today. And I believe Paul Dowdy, if I got this right from earlier, Paul is actually the brother-in-law of Larry, right? Is that correct? I think I got that correct. Okay. And he was a lineman. And he was a lineman as well, so very good. Thank you for being here. John Broderick was a substation operator. John died on June 22nd, 1953 after coming in contact with a 240-volt line in a substation near 18th and Grant in Omaha, Nebraska. John was 30 years old and had been with OPPD for 7 years at the time of his death. He was survived by his wife, Shirley Ann, 2 daughters, Peggy Ann and Jacqueline Kay, and son, John Thomas. Argel Harshberger. He died on September 23, 1953 from injuries sustained from a fall while working on a pole near 68th and Mercy in Omaha, Nebraska. He was 33 years old and had been with OPPD for 7 years at the time of his death. During World War II, while stationed as a cook on board the USS Nevada, Mr. Harshberger was injured when the ship was damaged by enemy gunfire and suffered a direct hit by a plane off the coast of Okinawa. He was survived by his wife, Pat, his son, Daniel, and twins, Bradley and Cindy. Lawrence Wood. Lawrence was also a lineman. When I take a look at Lawrence's picture, I see this grin of confidence across many of our men and women that are in the line and substation profession here. I have to smile a little bit on that, but that's the kind of confidence that our men and women have. Lawrence did die on June 20th, 1964 from injuries sustained from a fall after coming in contact with an 8,000-volt line atop a cable terminal pole near 87th and Capitol in Omaha. The work was part of a restoration effort from a storm that at the time was billed as the worst storm in OPPD's history with sustained winds of over 95 miles per hour. He was 34 years old, had 11 years with OPPD at the time of his death. After his first year, Mr. Wood served a 4-year enlistment in the U.S. Navy before returning to OPPD as a groundman helper. He was survived by his wife Jean, his son Bill, his mother, and 2 sisters. Mervyn Stengel. Mervyn was a lineman that died on September 7, 1965, after making contact with a line of which he was working near 91st and Charles in Omaha. He was working as part of a 3-man crew responding to a storm that resulted in heavy flooding throughout the Omaha metro. Casey, as he was known around the district, was 34 years old and had 11 years with OPPD at the time of his death. Prior to coming to OPPD, Casey served in the United States Marine Corps and served in the Korean War. He was survived by his wife Rita, his daughter Mary Beth, his sons Wayne, Steve, and Timothy. And his son Wayne followed in his dad's footsteps at OPPD, eventually retiring in 2013 as a field supervisor in T&D operations after 38 years, and I believe is still active in the utility business in Iowa. Dwayne Wilson. Dwayne Wilson was a lineman who died on July 22nd, 1968 from injuries sustained when a pole he was helping to remove toppled. The crew was removing a line near 8th and Douglas in Omaha to prepare for the dismantling of the old Exarban building. Dwayne was 26 years old and was an apprentice who had only been with OPPD for 13 months at the time of his death. He was survived by his wife, Beverly. Michael Toms. Michael Toms died on July 10th, 1974 from an electrocution while working on a transformer near Elmwood, Nebraska. He was 29 years old and had been with OPPD for 5 years at the time of his death. He was also a veteran of the United States military. He was survived by his parents, grandparents, and his sister. Michael Formanak. He died on January 19, 1981 after making contact with a live circuit while working on a pad mount transformer on the west edge of Elkhorn. Michael was 36 years old and had been with OPPD for 12 years at the time of his death. He was survived by his wife Carol and sons Jason and Alan, his parents, 4 brothers, and 1 sister. Walter Pond. Walter was a cable splicer and died January 7th, 1983 from injuries received during an underground vault explosion just west of 16th and Harney in Omaha. Fellow employee Steve Slatton was also with him in the vault but recovered from his injuries. Walt was 56 years old and had been with OPPD for 30 years at the time of his death. Walter was known as an expert splicer. He trained OPPD apprentices and even worked with cable manufacturers to ensure OPPD had the best materials possible. He was survived by his wife, Kathleen, daughters Diane and Marianne, 5 brothers, 6 sisters, and 3 grandchildren. And here is a picture of Walter in the flash of 1950 when he was connecting a new streetlight cable, or a cable to a new street lamp. Jimmy Dobbs. Jimmy Dobbs died on May 4th, 1988, resulting from the electrocution that occurred while he was relocating a pole for a highway project southwest of Ashland along Highway 6th. Jimmy was 40 years old and had been with OPPD for 14 years at the time of his death. He was the kind of person who picked up people when they were a little down, said Jack Finney, field supervisor at Louisville. I know I speak for all the people here when I say he was everyone's friend, on and off the job. He was survived by his wife, Dale Ann, daughters Anne Marie and Carolyn, his mother, 2 brothers, and 3 sisters. And Don Dobbs, who we introduced a little bit earlier with the Larry McGrew family, was the cousin of Jimmy Dobbs. Paul Neiman. Paul Neiman was a cable splicer who died on June 19th, 1989 from injuries sustained during a ground vault accident in downtown Omaha. Fellow splicers Frank Dornicke and Carla Fitzpatrick were also injured in the accident. Paul was 46 years old and had been with OPPD for 19 years. Paul was survived by his wife Joyce and his daughter Charity. Chris Merrill. Chris was a lineman that died on February 23rd, 1990, as a result of an electrocution that occurred while he was working near 23rd and Gregg in Bellevue, Nebraska. Chris was 29 years old and had been with OPPD for just 2 years. According to Jerry Krause, the division manager of the electric operations at the time, Chris was an exemplary employee and a perfect example of the type of person you like to have working for you. Chris was survived by his parents, 4 brothers, and 6 sisters. Ken Kitchen, transportation mechanic, December 27th, 2000. Ken died after he was struck by a vehicle alongside West Dodge Road while trying to clear debris from under another person's car. Truly living, caring for each other, and the passion to serve as part of our core values. Ken was 53 years old at the time of his death. He had been with OPPD for 26 years. He is survived by his wife Cindy and son Josh, who are both with us today. So Cindy and Josh, thank you for being here. Survived by his daughter Jennifer and his parents and brother and 2 sisters. Thank you for being here. Ken was also pretty instrumental in our Power Drive program when we first started out, and incredibly committed to that and helping young kids learn about technology and all of those kinds of things was just wonderful. Michael Johnson. Michael was a lineman who died on December 10th, 2002 from injuries sustained when he fell from a pole in which he was working. Michael was 37 years old and had been with the district for just a little over a year. He was a 20-year member of the Ashland Fire Department and had been recently elected assistant chief. According to the fire chief, Rick Grauholtz, he was the kind of person that people like to follow. He did it in a way just by setting a good example. He was survived by his wife, Janine, son, Paul, daughter, Taylor, and his mother, brother, and sister. Before we do our moment of silence, I would like to offer a utility worker's prayer. Almighty God, creator of the earth, wind, and rain, protect us as we journey through the morning mist, the noontime sun, and the evening shadows. Help us to always remember that the most powerful energy can light the sky and run across the wires that only time and experience can guide us to touch. Teach us to trust in your divine intervention, but prepare us for the unnatural clashes that neither you, God, nor man can always control. Lead us into the darkest storms and deliver us to serve those who depend on our skills to energize their farms, their homes, and their businesses. Thank you, O God, for every blessing, and may you give us strength and insight to remain diligent in our skills and return home safely to our families. Amen. And if we would have a moment of silence. I would like to thank the families of the men and women that we remembered here today that are with us here at the Omaha Center. So thank you very much for being here.